search for CIS
What is it?
4200.
Fall 2022?
Yeah, fall 22. Like search for CIS 4200.
If there's doubt, run the staff search.
Yeah.
All right, the stream should be up now. Can one of you guys check? Wasim or Ethan?
4200.
Yeah, Wasim, use the staff search.
Things coming up. Yeah. Wait, hold on. I have an idea.
All right, we should be good. All right, so who here knows how to snapshot their VM? Who here does not know how to snapshot their VM? All right, cool. Are you using Workstation?
You can uncheck list open.
All right, so look at my screen. All right, so with VMware Workstation, the way you want to snapshot is on the top, there's one of these buttons called like Manage Snapshots, or you could just take a snapshot right there. There's no audio? That's so weird because the mic's being picked up. Hey, Square Zero.
Wait, I hear it.
Should I turn it up? The gain. Da-da-da. All right, that should be good. Test, test. All right, I just changed it. Much better. Okay, cool. All right. Did everyone take a snapshot? Because this is going to be very important because the script I'm going to have you guys run is going to do a lot of funny stuff to your VM. And we're going to fix that, or at least identify it. Because what we're doing is it's both a little bit of privilege escalation and blue teaming at the same time because it goes both ways with how these configurations go. So within the Discord and under meetings chat, there's a GitHub link. And I want you guys to git clone that to your home repo or your just home directory. So git clone.
And to the home or like the root directory?
Your typical home directory. So if I go here on my VM, I'm already in my home directory right here. So I'll just git clone. Oh wow, I guess Ubuntu doesn't come with git anymore. That's weird. You could just do cd and it will automatically map to it. Hey Chris, is it good now? Yes. So if you go to the Discord and go to the meetings chat, text chat, there's a GitHub link, and you just want to git clone that to your virtual machine. But make sure you snapshot your VM before anything. Please and thank you. And if you guys want to see the command, some versions of Ubuntu do not come with like git already installed. So it's just going to be sudo apt install git, git. And then you're just going to clone this repository.
Just for you, dog.
Did everyone clone the repo? Not yet? This is the repo right here if you guys don't see it. It's just like this URL.
There's only one class with all these?
That's what I'm saying, bro. It's always like only one class, but like half this class.
Yeah, the registrations.
We live. Yes, we are.
It's okay. Thanks teaching an elective this summer.
Who here has not cloned it yet?
Where did you say the link was in the Discord?
Meetings chat.
We're just having a bit of problems with Git getting installed. It's just fussing.
Just do sudo apt update first and then try it, just in case. You good, Jack?
Yeah, I had to revert. Yeah, it's a long story. I had to revert to the snapshot of the original installation.
That's fine, bro.
Snapshot. Let's go.
All right.
We just get cloning the link, or
Yeah, git clone this. Like, so when you go to the code icon, you can just copy this HTTP link, TPS, and then you just git clone it to your home repo or home repository directory. God, too many terms.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I have that same error. Is this the Braylog VM?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's same as Braylog talking that directory. So I can't use it.
Are we still having problems? Are you good back there? Good? It's loading? Oh, your VM or the installation?
It's just
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, that's why I took a screenshot. So I just need to convert it. Put the install. This installation is such a pain in the ass.
Let's see any chat so far. We are good. All right, so for the people that have cloned it, we can just go one more step further right now while we're waiting for other people. So I have two ways to run it right now. One has output and the other does not have output. We're going to do the no output way for right now because it will like hint towards things that have been changed. So what you got to do is add execute permissions for the script. So if we go to the terminal, and then we can see the my directory. Where did I clone it? I'm blind. Oh. There you go. So you just cd to the directory where we clone the repo, and you should be able to see the files. So we change the mode on it to give it execution permissions. My VM is chugging again like last time.
You just can't type, bro.
Hey.
Shots fired.
So once you run that, you should see it's now a different color depending on what like terminal you're using. I'm using Terminator, which has its own color palette. But you can see it now has the execute permission. So now the next step is running it with sudo, and then redirecting your output, standard output, and standard error. So that there is some errors that do happen within the script, but we're going to ignore both of those. So we're just putting those to /dev/null, which means we won't see it on our screen. So sudo / totally safe, and then 1 goes into dev/null, /dev/null, and 2 goes into dev/null. And if you guys don't know what 1 and 2 mean, it's basically bash has like numbers that represent standard input, standard output, and standard error. What's up?
Can you make the...
Bigger?
Yeah.
Can everyone see it now? So I cloned the repo. I entered the directory that was cloned. I added the execute permission. And then I'm going to run it with sudo. And make sure you include this second portion of it so you don't get any like hints towards what you got to solve. It is totally safe. Just use it on a VM that is not publicly connected to the internet. Oh yeah, and you guys should be fine because you're already on like host-only interface because VMware does do that for you automatically. So don't worry about it. And we're going to revert it anyway at the end of the meeting, so there's no harm done. Is everyone good so far with this command? All right, cool. So now we'll run it. And it's going to do some fun stuff that we do not know. And you give it a second, and it'll just pop up again with your user and like the host name, like the typical command prompt stuff. All right, cool. It ran. So, from the stuff I taught you 2 weeks ago with Linux hardening, what is the first place we should look? A certain file, in instance. Does anyone remember?
Etsy logs.
You're really close. It is an Etsy.
That's the passwords?
Mm-mm. It's a configuration file with a service we use almost all the time.
SSH config.
SSH
dconfig, yes, because it's like daemon or daemon, however you pronounce it. SSHD is the server that runs on your machine. And if we go to that directory /etc/ssh, or not SSHD, just SSH in general. Whoops. And we can see we got that SSH config, and then we got the SSH dconfig. And if you guys aren't too familiar with how this looks normally, you can see there's now a .1 right here. And this is really recent because both of these have the same timestamp compared to every other config. So let's check out that config. So one of the easiest ways to like open up a file instead of like catting it out is I like to use less because it lets you use your arrow keys to go up and down and page up and do sshd _config. And then we got our server config for SSH in general. And if we look through it under authentication, there are some areas that might be missing. And we keep scrolling through.
What did I miss after the bash part? Where was that from?
We got really typical configuration stuff, but if we go to the very end, we see some flags have been changed, some arguments for like the config itself. So we're allowing root login. Do we want to do that, guys, for SSH? Hell no. And we have password authentication for yes. Now, this is a good and bad thing. In this case, it's really bad because we are allowing root to log in through SSH, and they have password authentication as well. So basically, if root has an insecure password, like password exclamation point, a brute forcing tool could easily get that and get root access to your machine. So we're going to change that config. So we're going to do sudo nano sshd config. Whoops. What did I do? Oh. What's up?
I ran the first sudo command and my terminal is just like frozen after a couple minutes. Should I like restart?
Let it finish. It should finish automatically, then just prompt you. It won't say it's done, but it will have like the line that says, "Hey, enter your next command." What's up?
I also didn't get an SSHD config file
After running it? Do you have internet connection right now to that VM? Like, can you like access Firefox and go to like Chrome or Google?
Yeah, I'm looking for an SSH thing as well. I'm not finding it, and I have internet on this.
Yeah, it says SSH config D is directory.
Oh no. So it's /sc/ssh/sshd _config. You're there? Right there. That's really weird.
There's not even an @c SSH.
Really?
Yeah, I just.
You're at the right here?
I thought you back to root.
And then you do CD.
I know nothing for some. But I have to go to share.
CD.
There we go. Oh, that's fine. And I want config with you, right?
Yeah. So go to /etc and then cd to just ssh. Everyone should have that directory because you do have an SSH client on the machine. So when you list the files there, make sure you just do LA just for like the list all. And everyone should have this file because my script does install SSH server for you guys. Do you see it now?
I have SSHD config. I don't have SSHD config.1.
Oh, and you run the script?
Yeah, I ran it.
Okay, don't worry about the .1 for right now. Go to the open up SSHD config and go to the bottom and see if it actually changed. It didn't? Okay, rerun the script then, I guess.
SSH _config.
Does everyone else have that .1? Because if you do, that means most of the script or all the script has ran perfectly fine. I did test this last night. So we're good. Okay.
It's not config, it's config1 is what I'm looking, right?
Oh, you're not going to change config 1. So config 1, okay, just to show you guys the difference. So if I just use less on the config 1. And look here and go to the authentication section. See, permit root login is set to no for the .1. This is just a backup of your previous server configuration.
It's supposed to say yes in config, right? Well, mine still both say no.
for both password authentication?
Yeah.
Is it uncommented?
It's commented.
And is it for the .1?
Not for the .1. Let me go check the .1.
Because .1 should say no, and where's the password authentication?
There is nothing in .1.
It exists.
Oh, I'm not doing SSHD. I'm doing SSH. That's
Oh, no, do SSHD. Yeah. So for the people that do have the typical SSHD config, we're going to use sudo nano on it because we have to, because of the permissions, as we can see right here, we only have read access for like, user and group, whereas the root has like read and write because root is the one that owns it. So we're just going to sudo nano that file, the initial config, not the .1. The .1 is just a backup for later. And we just want to go down to what we changed on the very bottom. And we want to say permit root login to no. And the password authentication can stay yes for right now. As long as you're using like a secure password, you're generally fine. So once you're done, you could just, depending on whatever text editor you're using, save it. Everyone good so far with saving the file? All right, cool. And then we're going to restart the SSH service because it has not taken that configuration as it's like running config right now. So we can just do systemctl, and I think it's restart sshd, that service. Yeah. So sudo systemctl restart sshd service. Can everyone see that fine? All right, cool. Everyone fixed it so far? Well, congratulations, you fixed one of the vulnerabilities. So after we fix the SSH service and reload the service to make sure it's running with the proper configuration, what's the next thing we should check for on the machine? We covered it 2 weeks ago.
Navigating to the directory.
That's fine.
The UWF firewall or whatever it was.
I would check that. So we're going to do sudo ufw and let's take the status to see if it's even running. And right now we can see it's not even running. Typically, we want a firewall running. So we're going to actually turn that on. And we're going to use like the default settings for it too. So sudo ufw, does anyone remember the 2 default rules we say? Default, you're really close. So it's sudo ufw default deny incoming. We want to deny any incoming connections. But I'm going to just put this on the back burner for right now because there is something a little bit set up later. But on the other way, during competitions, you do want to make sure the firewall is absolutely turned on. But we're going to skip that step for right now just because there's something a little bit hidden now with the networking of this virtual machine. As long as it says like inactive still, when you have run status, you'll be fine. But if you guys want, we can add these default rules. So the default deny incoming. So you run that rule, and then you run it again, and you want to do default allow outgoing. And since we know that there's an SSH server on here, we want to make an exclusive rule just for that. So we just want to allow 22, which is port 22, which is what is SSH the server runs on natively. So after all that, we're going to come back to enable the firewall a little bit later, but we're going to go into some other steps. So you can just clear. Does anyone enter these commands for the default rules? If you're stuck, raise your hand. All right, cool. So I'm going to clear. I kind of already hinted towards it before for not enabling the firewall just yet. What is something we should be checking?
What ports we have active at the moment?
Yeah, what's the command for that? Starts with an N. What command? Netstat. Now, your VM might not have netstat installed. Mine does, so if you just want to install it, just sudo apt install netstat. Spelled that way. So if we want to find the listening connections on this machine, we do tulpn for like port and like the process ID, et cetera, et cetera. And we run that, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Is there any obscure ports that are running right now that you guys don't know immediately off the top of your head?
8080.
What is something typically used with 8080?
A proxy.
Yes and no. A lot of like database services and like extra HTTP servers do run on 8080, but we might want to still check that out regardless. So we don't see what the process ID is. Does anyone remember why? It goes back to us running this command right here.
Run it as sudo so we don't have root permission.
Correct. We know that there is something listening on 8080, but we do not know what the service is because or process is because we don't own that process at all. So then we're going to run the same command just with sudo. And a good way to do that is a nice little shortcut is you could do sudo exclamation point, and that will run the previous command as sudo. Nice little handy tip when you have a wrong command. And now we can see a bunch of process IDs because we ran the command as root, so we get to see what is actually running. And we see the PID for 8080. Does anyone know what that is, guys? Learned about it in the CTF meetings. What is NC, guys?
Netcat.
You know what that does. We probably don't want it, do we? And just to confirm it's actually netcat, I'm going to split my terminal. And I'm going to try to connect to it. So I'm going to use netcat myself, and then I'm going to connect to the local host, which is 127.0.0.1. That means my local host itself, or you could just type the word localhost, it doesn't matter. And then you define the port that you want to connect to. Since we do know netcat is listening on 8080, we're going to specify the port of 8080. Now run it. And there's nothing running there at the moment, but it has not rejected us yet. So if we run netstat again, and we just get rid of the L flag because the L flag stands for listening for netstat. And we can see right now we have an established connection with netcat. So whatever that's happening down here, even though commands are not being executed, we still see that we are connected through netcat. And you can see it both ways because localhost to foreign address, it's the localhost. And it's the other way around too. Because we talked about how usually clients just use a unused port because we got like 65,000 of them. And then this is where the netcat server is running. So we can just control C on that netcat instance. And if you run the netstat command again, we can see it's no longer established. And if we run the previous netstat command again, the one that specifies listening with sudo, we can see netcat is no longer in this list. Now that could mean two things. It was just a temporary netcat instance that was just there, or it could be persistent and spawn every like 5 minutes. So that's one of the things you have to look for is like every 5 to 10 minutes, you should always probably run netstat during your competitions to see if there's some sort of persistent shell that keeps running.
So why wouldn't you just block netcat?
Well, you could remove netcat. You could remove netcat, but certain competitions specifically, they have like predetermined services that need to be on, and for some odd reason they could say, oh, you need to make sure that this netcat listener is still here for some like chat window, some like obscure one. But when we were talking about the UFW before, we did see that it was listening on 8080. So in that case, this was a reverse shell. I was connecting to it because it just is more of a bind shell actually in this case. But UFW would prevent that from happening basically when we run UFW enable. Is everyone like up to date where we are right now?
Mine takes forever to boot up, but I just did the SSHD config after writing out like the no for permit root login.
Did you run your most?
Did you run the script I linked in the Discord?
Yeah, was it not the CHD, the totally safe?
Yes, the totally safe.
Yeah, I ran.
So you ran it and you let it do its thing? And you see that there is a SSHD config, and there should be two of them, one that ends in .1 and then one that does not end in anything special.
Okay, .1. I just did the one that didn't have anything.
Yeah, the .1,
I think you're already on the step of reconfiguring it to secure, right? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I just wrote out to the
are we good to move on? All right, so we just got rid of a netcat listener, and we can run that again just to be safe, the netstat command, and we see netcat is not running, so it's not like some sort of script that is running every minute, so we should be okay there for right now. But I taught you guys a little bit about like PS, like AUX, which shows like all your processes, and I showed you the visual form of it too with HTOP. HTOP is a really good way to filter for some weird processes.
Wait, HTOP?
HTOP, yes. You might need to, yes.
What he's doing now isn't dependent on longer.
Does everyone have HTOP? At least,
How'd you open it?
oh, you just, okay, it's just HTOP the command. You might need to install it with sudo apt install HTOP. And once you're there, we can also look for some weird like processes. So if we actually, we could do a filter by anything that's like root. Or no, not that, it's not filtering properly. It's supposed to be filtering the command. So we could do a sort by user.
How do we get a filter and a sort? Yeah, how do we do that?
Oh, it's on the bottom. You can either click them with your mouse or use the corresponding F key, function key. So I just did a sort by, and I clicked the user for option, the user filter. And you can see my own user is running all these things, nothing, crazy. But if we go to what root is running as, should be on the very bottom. There's a lot of processes. I probably should have filtered this a little bit differently. There you go. Let me make this a little smaller. All right, cool. I'm going to actually do this a little bit different way. I'm going to rerun it, and then I'm just going to do a filter, which will only show me like what commands are running. So you could just type nc again, and it should filter by anything that has nc in it within the string. And we can see that there's no longer any like netcat instances running. And what's really nice about HTOP is it tells us what root is running as processes too. Very useful.
Did you just do NC space, or did you just,
Well, I did the filter option, and then I just typed nc enter. You can see it on the, so you can see on the bottom, nc. And you can also do it as netcat too, because there is like aliases for netcat for both ways. Does anyone have any questions so far?
what's the other image? Oh, netcat.
Yeah, netcat like fully. So there is like, okay, so with basically any programming language, you can make a bind shell or reverse shell. What is a very popular language that someone might use for that is almost installed in every Linux machine?
Python.
Python's an interpreter language. C? No, that's running now within like, no, not bash. No, not for this. Because if I filter by bash,
I see it, it's Python.
well, there's a Python instance right here that is spawning a bash cell. And look who owns it, root. So we're using the Python 3 command, and then we're using the argument -c to basically interpret what we're writing. And we're importing PTY, which is like a terminal library basically. And we are spawning, if I make this a little bit smaller, we're spawning this type of shell. Now, this could mean a few things. This isn't necessarily a, not really a reverse shell or a bind shell in this instance, but this could be a user that's already on the system that found how to privilege escalate to run a process as root, and they're using that.
It's not something you want to trust, essentially.
Not at all, especially when you see there's this root instance that's running their own instance of bash themselves. So we could just do F9 and kill, and it's no longer going to be there. But it might not work because this is owned by root.
If we ran htop as sudo.
Yeah, if you run htop as sudo, you should be able to kill it properly because you'd have the right permissions for it. So I'm just going to filter by Python this time, and you can see we got like normal Python stuff, like how Terminator's running, the network dispatcher, but obviously the one that looks out of place is the one that's using the -c argument, which is its own, like, it's interpreting commands for the Python itself. So then you could just kill it. And no longer it's there. And just to be safe, we can run htop as like the as our user instead of root and search for it as well. And see, it's no longer there. So let me check. Anything else? Okay, that should be fine. Any other questions so far? Do you guys like it how I'm tying in stuff from 2 weeks ago with real concepts? That is actually on competition machines. All right, so we checked SSH config because we knew there was an SSH server. We checked active connections and listening connections and killed the ones that looked obscure. Now, we can finally activate our firewall. So sudo ufw enable. I forgot how to show rules again. App list. Yeah. Did everyone enable their firewall? Are we good so far? Cool. So now we have our firewall enabled and we got rid of any obscure connections. So anyone trying to do like a reverse shell on us or a bind shell where we're trying to reach out to this client, the firewall is going to block it because it's denying incoming traffic. That's the default rule we set up. So the only thing we really have to worry about is if someone already has access to the machine through SSH, because we do have that allowed, and then have them go start a process that goes outgoing. What's up, Jack?
So it's important to like cancel all the processes before you start the firewall?
You can do the firewall like immediately, but I wouldn't during a competition immediately turn it on because a lot of these competitions do score you based off your services and their uptime, and the firewall could just disconnect that altogether to like their scoring engine they usually use. So it's best to figure out what is necessary on the machine through netstat because they usually give you like the ports and the name of the service too. So you would add the rules to the firewall that way, then enable the firewall. And then you could manually go through and disconnect the reverse shells and stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay. So we got 2 more vulnerabilities to go through, kind of revealing that. Any ideas what they could be? What's up?
Other users on the machine?
Well, let's check that out. So we could just do cat sc password d. This will not show your passwords. This is just a quick and easy way to see what users are on the machine. We got root. We got like some typical users, www data, backup. Nothing too obscure. If you're, yeah, nothing crazy. But that's a good place to check to see if there's any weird users. So we're just going to clear that for now. Any other ideas, Chris?
Is there any way to check for like a non-active connection?
Like,
let's say we had it so or the attacker set it so when you go to shut down your computer, it runs a script so you wouldn't be able to see it.
so you're saying at boot up it will start it?
At boot up or at shutdown, yeah.
So
Where you can't see it.
we could check that, and that actually is a good place to check. Usually that stuff is stored in something called a cron tab or your cron job, and basically cron is a good way to automate like almost anything for your Linux machine. So for example, like the best way to think of it is you're a web developer and you're constantly pushing your your website to this Linux server, and you're like, wow, I should probably back this up like daily or weekly before like something happens. So you can create a cron job to copy the root of your file or of your web server, and then just copy it somewhere else, and then you could just send it off to a different server. So that's a good way as an automation for cron jobs. And would you say, Riley?
Can you go back to the password file, please?
I can. Now everyone's password file is going to look a little bit different depending on what services you do have installed. This is kind of just a lazy way to see what users are on the system, or just what users exist.
Okay. I was just making sure I was looking at like the right thing.
Mm-hmm. So we have that. And you said
Start up and shut down.
start up and shut down with
And you
So-
remove the Chrome tab.
with cron tab. So we can edit our own cron tab, or we can just list it. So I just do cron tab -L, and you see there's no cron tab at all for my user. Now there could be many users on the system that have their own cron jobs, and like a cron tab for their jobs. So instead of doing that, let's see if root has any cron jobs, because that would be a really good way to see what Jack stated earlier, if there's some sort of like persistent shell that spawns every time you turn on the computer. So you're going to run sudo cron tab again, -L, and we see there's actually something here with seam. Do you know what this does?
It backs up.
That's a great way.
Does it back up
How persistent does it back up?
every minute?
Yes. So every star represents like a moment of time. And the best way to show you what cron jobs or like what the format looks like is I'm just going to pull up a calculator for you guys. So cron tab calculator. And we can see, we can put in our exact format. So star, 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 star. And it says at every minute. But if we wanted to do it at like every hour,
You see at the first star is the minutes, the second one's hours, days, month, and weekdays again.
exactly. So if we just change the second star to be 1, it says like at every minute past hour 1. So that's basically saying once we hit like hour 1 in the day, which is 1 a.m., it will run that.
What's the difference between this and like that daemon thing that runs in startup?
They don't use their own cron job. It's usually system CTL has like their system files, or like they're called unit files, I believe, and those are like its own service. Cron tab is mostly for just user automation for certain scripts. And we can see if we just put 30 and do star, 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 it says like at every 30 minutes run the script. You can even just do it as at every, yeah, should be that. There you go. So you can get kind of complex with how you want to rule stuff. So this is saying like on the 30-minute mark of the day, of the very first day of the month. So basically once a month at the 30-minute mark, you do whatever you need. And that could just be, what if you want to scrub your files for your RAID array, just to make sure, there's nothing corrupted there. You can do some wacky stuff with cron. But in our situation, we have something that's running every single minute.
Like doing a backup essentially.
Correct. That's what we expect. That's what it says. You can't just can't really take it by just a file name. It could be something else. So let's go to this directory /opt/scripts. Let's go there. Do lsslA. Ignore the red thing for right now. Is everyone there? And is it red for you guys too? Or very, very bright looking? Very highlighted. Okay, cool. So I'm going to split my screen again. Or no, go back up here. And I'm going to go back to the directory here in a different instance. And I want to run sudo cron tab L again and see what's really happening. So it's running /bin/bash on this file. Now we can see when we run pwd, we're in the right directory, but backup.sh does not exist. Whoopsie, the system admin forgot to put the file there. And guess what? In this current directory, every user, every owner of this could write, read, and execute files. That's lovely. So we're going to go a little bit past that. Now, this is kind of like the red team aspect, you could say. When this is something that could happen easily on Hack the Box, or even try Hack Me. And we're going to show you how to exploit it and how to fix it at the same time. So we got just backup.sh. That does not exist in this current directory. So I'm just going to make that file. Because if it doesn't exist, I know bash is being ran as root because it's the root's cron job. So I'm going to open up, and then you're going to do shebang, which is determining what interpreter you want. And I want to do /bin/bash just to be safe. What's a bash command we could do that runs as root that we want to see immediately? Because this is a cron tab, and it's not going to be running in our terminal per se. But it's going to be running somewhere in the background. But we want to be able to see it as an indicator.
How to make a new terminal.
Make a new terminal? We won't be able to see that, sadly.
Checking for listeners on netstat.
You could. What if we want to start a listener as root? Because remember, this script is running headless. We're not going to be able to see the output. The only thing we can really see is the action from a command, not the output that it makes, if that makes sense.
Something like sudo netcat 127.0.0.1 /
Well, that would try to connect somewhere else, localhost, but we're going to use netcat and actually spawn a listener. So we're going to use netcat and do lvnp. We're going to listen and verbose, no DNS, and then specify the port, and let's just put 8080 again for fun. Then we exit out, and then we can see the script does exist here under my user this time, but it doesn't matter in the cron tab sense because it's just looking for the specific file. Does everyone make the backup file with the netcat script within it? All right, cool. So let's see if that ran. How do we check if it's listening? Cough, cough, netstat. TLPN. And we'll see. What's the time? Now, since we just put the script in there, it's basically, if we were late by just a few seconds by the minute mark, it's going to have to wait a minute again because that's how the rule is set for cron tab.
Will it not execute because it doesn't have execute version yet?
No,
Look right there.
Using bash.
Okay.
So look, we have 8080 open again. So when we have that, we know it's running the script because we told this, the content of the script was to set up a listener on 8080. Mm-hmm. And if we go back to our netstat command and run that back as sudo exclamation point, and we can, why did you not run? Oh, it ran clear. Whoops. It ran clear as the sudo. That's funny. You can see netcat is the listener for 8080. So we know the script's doing nasty stuff. What's up?
Would that script throw any errors trying to make multiple listening connections on the same port over and over again?
Probably not because it's running in its own kind of instance. And we can see that, here, let's actually test that. Oh, see, there's two now. Kind of weird. So if we netcat to that, Now this may not work because, or it's going to work because it's localhost, because the firewall stuff is dealing with external incoming, not internal from the networking stack on the VM. So we can do 8080 again and see if this is working. And what's really good about the newer version of Netcat is it doesn't have the -e flag, which lets you specify a shell. Thank God. Because so right now we're basically having a chat with root, if the root could read it right now. Hi. And they would see it on their end. So I can cancel it, clear, and check it again. And we can see there's one less now because we killed that like a certain one. So let's get a little dirty with this. This backup. Yeah, it's going to keep spotting them. So we're going to change the script. So no, back up. Let's do something. Now you can see it's already being edited. Oh, it's probably because it's up here. Yep, that's fine. Ignore that. All right. So what is something root has that we cannot access without using sudo?
The SSHD config file?
Yeah, but we do have read permissions to it already. So that's not entirely what we want. Think about it as, you know, you got local access to this box. Because let's say you're like pen testing this one machine. And you don't have full access to root, but you do have access to a root script that is being ran as root. But what is something that you could do to possibly get root's password in some form? Exactly. So we have a file called etc/shadow. And shadow is basically, I guess you could say, like the database of where the passwords are hashed for all your Linux accounts. Now if I try to run that, it will say permission denied because that's only read and write by root, no one else. But since this script we have that's running every minute is doing its own thing, as the root user, we want to copy that file possibly. So just copy etc/shadow. And then we don't know where this script is running in the current context, so let's just give it an absolute path /opt/scripts. And let's just name it shadow.1. Everyone good there so far? Just checking the chat.
So this is essentially creating a viewable shadow instance, essentially? This is like creating a viewable shadow instance?
Well, it's copying the file from where their permissions are secure and putting it somewhere in a current directory where we should be able to see it ourselves. Because we're effectively trying to, like, I guess you could say laterally move to a different user if you're penetration testing this box. So once you have this script, you can just exit out, and then just to be safe, to make sure it's there, you know, shebang bin bash, and we do the copy command. So this might run immediately. And look, shadow.1 is already there. It ran. And if we do /la, look at the permissions for it. Yeah, it says, I think I might be able to read that still. Second. All right, I wasn't able to read it. Let's edit the script a little bit.
To do like change mod?
Exactly. So with this current instance, root copied the script, or copied etc/shadow, and then put it to /opt/scripts, but it still held the permissions of root owner and like only read for like root itself and read and write for root itself. So what we could do is let's make it very readable. We're going to use change mod, and then we're just going to do 777. That means every permission for everyone on opt/scripts/shadow1. Oh my lord, please work. Are we good there so far? So this is going to run as root the chmod command, and then it's going to add these permissions, or change these permissions altogether for this file. And it's just like how Python works, how majority of programming languages work. It's just going to go top down. So it's going to copy the file, then change the permissions of the new file. So I wrote it. What's up?
Do you need to copy it again? Won't it just change the file that's already?
I'm just copying it initially, and then I change the permissions.
Well, I mean, it's already in that file, so wouldn't it just change that?
It is, but okay. So think about this. If there's some sort of backdoor, and we know this is like an active like production machine that could be swapping different users like every month or so because people get hired and fired, this is a good way to always have a current list of all the hashes on the machine. So that's why we're basically copying it every time.
But it would like copy the current one that we have in the directory.
Yeah, it will copy the current one
I'm
for the
sorry, not
machine.
copy, I mean, it'll change the.
Yeah, it will change the, yes. So, and then we change the permission so we can actually read it. So now, if I look at this, look, it's now highlighted differently now. And it has all the flags, all your permission flags. So, I'm not going to show it on screen, but you guys can cat out that shadow file and see your password hash. So you could just do cat shadow.1. And if your root script works properly, oh my God, please work. I'm not running that, but that will show you my hash for my password. Can you guys see it?
What kind of hash? Like,
I forgot what
12.
is it 512? SHA-512?
So you likely won't be able to crack it, but it's still kind of cool.
No, you only could crack it if it was very weak.
How did you run the backup file? It says permissions met.
Oh, you don't run the backup file. The cron tab from root is running it for you. So all we're changing is what we want root to run in that cron job. Everyone good so far? Sick. So we're like, okay, what do we want to do to get rid of this script running every single minute? Because obviously this is some form of persistence that is actively copying every active user in their hash. And there's always going to be a user out there with an insecure password, let's be honest. So what we could do is, since we already have like sudo access, we could do sudo cron tab -e for edit. And it says, if this is your first time, it's going to say what text editor you choose. I'm just going to use Nano because it's just quick for me right now. And then we can see the line that is being ran. And effectively, we know that's not good, so we just delete it.
what did you just run?
I'll show you. So sudo cron tab -e. -e is for editing the root's cron tab because we're running it with sudo. Are we good so far? So now, it says right now, installing new cron tab. So if we do -L for listing what the current cron tab is, it's blank. Thank God. It's no longer having a persistent script that's root every single minute. That's great. And a lot of competitions will have scripts that do that. So cron tab is a really important place to check as root and the user you're currently signed in as. I highly recommend it. So now we're on like the last vulnerability, and you guys might have already seen it before because it's red on my screen. Exec, which is owned by root and like the group of root as well. Does anyone see anything weird with the permissions of this one? There's something a little extra.
The S.
Does anyone know what the S is? Because we normally have read, write, and execute, but has anyone seen the S one before?
It's like the set UID.
Yes, set UID. Do you know what that does?
It's like it runs it in different user contexts.
Exactly. And who's the context that owns that file? Exactly. So if I run exec, /exec, because just to show you what this is, I can run file on it just to see what type of file it is. And it's just an ELF64 file. So this is most likely compiled. It's definitely compiled from some sort of language. I used C in this case. So we can use /exec. And we can see it prints out the user ID, which is us. Just to show you, I could just type ID. And you can see 1,000. but we got the execution ID of what the process is, and it says enter OS command. So just for fun, just oh god, whom I, who am I? And it says I am root. So obviously, this is a manual case of kind of like what was happening with the cron job, whereas we could edit the script and do whatever you want. But in this case, we actually have a shell that we could just make persistent for ourselves by entering OS commands. And since we are, in the CTF meetings, we were like chaining commands together with like the command injection. You can exactly do that here, basically. So what do we want to do to make this kind of persistent instead of just one command at a time?
/bin/bash.
Yes, sir. /bin/bash. Look at that. Bash 5.0. I am now bash, but see, it's running as NinjaByte. It's because it still kept the user ID. It didn't like keep it with like the execution ID. So we would have to go a little bit further with that. So let me just exit, run this script again, and let's do /bin, or let's just do sudo bin/bash and see if that elevates your privileges. Look at that, root. Look at that, and it held their permissions. So now we just have a root shell. This is just different compared to that one script we were backing up because we were just kind of doing like a string of commands every single minute. But what if we want to make it completely interactive? That's kind of the point of exec in this case. And see, I got a full-on terminal here. I could just do whatever I want. And since I have root privileges, I can install whatever I want. I can set up all those listeners that you want. I can have fun. How would we fix this? And I'm not going to say we can just remove the file, because here's the problem. Yes. But why can't we remove the file? Does anyone know why?
It might be a file that is legitimate and serving a legitimate purpose, but it's compromised.
Exactly. And it could be compromised, or it could just be sloppy dev work. Because you'll see in a lot of applications, they make their own scripts to do certain actions. So like backing up, or checking the integrity of like a config file, whatever it is. They might be lazy and set the setUID bit on that file, and some like researcher or pen tester is going to find that out, and then it's going to be this whole mess of deal.
Just a lazy.
Yeah, a lot of it's from lazy developers. Or it could just be an attacker that just had root before, set it up as a setUID, and then they're just using it as some form of a way to attack. So the way we just change that is we can just use chmod, and then they should do like 766. So it's octal, so it goes up to 7 for max. So it's going to be owner has like read, write, execute, and then everyone else has just read and write. Or is it?
Right now you're inside of the file that is the problem.
Correct.
Can you still do that outside of it, or
Yeah, you can still run this. I'm just having fun in the root context, but just to make it less confusing, I would just exit out and use my.
You didn't tell it what file necessarily.
Yes, you just want to use chmod for that because we're just changing it. Up. And now you guys might be used to just using like 3 numbers for your permissions, but that setUID is actually a 4th bit in the very beginning, and we want to set that to just 0 right now. So that means turn off any setUID bits, any group ID bits, and I forgot what the other one was. It might be. I forgot what it's called. And we just do it on exec. And it says permissions not permitted, so you're just going to have to use sudo. I'm going to do ls-la again. And we can see the S bit is no longer there. But it's still owned by root in the group root as well. But if we run that file,
It's not green now, so.
it's green. And look, the execution ID is now different. It's no longer inheriting using root for its execution ID, which is 0. It's using your ID. So when I actually type who am I, it's just going to be me because I'm still running it as my user's context. Does anyone have any questions so far? Pretty straightforward stuff? Nice. And clear. Any questions? Because you have officially solved all the vulnerabilities. What's up?
Okay, so we were able to copy out the shadow file,
Yes.
change dimensions on it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most immediate thing you could do with those hashes? Like if you didn't necessarily have the time to plug it into Hashcat or JavaScript.
So
or
you do have
worry about it immediately.
there is like CrackStation Online, which has a lot of cracked hashes for different types of hashes. So what an attacker could do is just like grep those hashes from that file and then just plug it into the online database and see if there's if those have been previously cracked before for weak passwords. That's like the immediate thing they could do. What's up?
I know that you just solved it, but for the exec file, you said that there was an S, like when it was highlighted red. Did you mean like a literal S? Like
Yeah, okay, I could show that again, yeah. So you can see we have, read, write, execute, read and execute, and read and execute. That's because the command I used to change the bit mode on it was 755, and those each correspond, like they're adding to each other. So you got like 1, 1, 4, and 1, 2, 4. So execute, I believe, is 1, read is 4, and then you got write, which is 2. So you add those up and you get 7. So that means all permissions for that certain section, which in this case is the owner.
What if the last thing we want to do is to go back and maybe close all netcat listening ports that had possibly opened over the course of this?
Yeah.
Just like one last check for it.
You can. That's what I kind of stated earlier. Check every 5 to 10 minutes for any established connections, listening connections, etc. Because during these competitions, you will have these type of scripts running, and a good way to actually check if there's a cron tab running, if you don't have root context, as you have a sudo password, there's this great repo.
Could you, in theory, create a script that goes through and essentially looks for all NC connections that are kind of invalid? Like you could go beforehand and get the ones that are the safe ones, because like you said on a box they're gonna have NCs that are just kind of need to stay there.
I said that because it's a chance it could be they could be real, actually established connections that need to be necessary, but typically they're not. But it's just kind of the leniency right there. Typically you want to do you do want to get rid of any netcat instance, because a lot of the services they will install on your machine will be have their own protocol, because netcat is just a plain text protocol.
Right. So you're saying so basically you can create a script that will essentially look for the netcats and then just get rid of them essentially.
Yeah, you can just have a recursive recursive bash script that runs netcat every 5 minutes, and then just greps for NC when you run it as sudo.
That's what I was thinking.
So this is a really great repo. It's really used a lot on Hack the Box for those machines. And this is a binary file that lets you run it as your own user, but you get to see any current root processes that are being started. Now, it's just Dominic Bricker PSPY, process spy. And I'm just going to show the little demo of it. You don't have to download it right now. I'm just going to git clone it in this repo just for fun. I did not copy it for some reason. Oh my god. I know my mouse was acting up. Alright, let's double check. This might actually, yeah, this is just their source code. I have to download their static version. There you go. That'll be my downloads directory. For anyone that's done a lot of Hack the Box, this is a very powerful tool, and this is kind of really good for blue teaming as well, I would say. So I'm going to go to that PSPY, and I'm going to run it, and we can see it's going to color code any root processes that are running. So for example, the ones we want to look for are these UID zeros right here. So we can see, there was a init auto no prompt for root that happened, and we can see like the netcat stuff from earlier. That was ran. You can even see that cron right there that was running. So this is a really great way just to see, even if there's not a cron job happening, but just some sort of script that is restarting itself without like cron. It's kind of going through logs, yeah, in a sense, but it also is checking like the constant stuff that's happening. So if I minimize it and just do like sudo, I don't know, touch file, and I gotta just fix that typo. That might detect something. Yeah, you can see right there, sudo touch file. It took the UID of 1,000, so that's mine, and that's the process ID of like what happened. It shows like I did open up Firefox and like open a new tab. So it even says new window. But if we do,
What's the process that ran immediately after your command? Was it the one that like logs the previous command?
it might. I don't know what the question mark actually means because it couldn't pull a UID. That's why it's kind of freaking out. But let's like do sudo netcat session. np. And you can see differently now. It actually ran it as root. UID 0. And we can see exactly the command. And even the process ID, that's just going up in like, what's that called? Just going up numerically. Okay, we're good there. You got any questions so far? Because I think that's really it. We officially solved all the vulnerabilities I made on your VMs. If you guys enabled your firewall, and got rid of the weird permissions on the exec script, turned off the Python bash instance that was started by root, and we could just confirm that that's gone by just going back to htop and just filtering for Python. And we can easily see that there's no like import pty spawn /bin/bash. And we can even just double check if even netcat's listening through here as well. So you can just do filter again and just type nc. And we do have that netcat listener from before. So if we actually kill this process and do sudo netstat tlpn. We got all these random backup things from before because we got rid of that backup script. Oh, scripts. Oh, I didn't get rid of it. Yeah, it's still, wait. Let me double check. Yeah, okay, it hasn't ran. And you can tell by the timestamp. It just says like 3 o'clock because my time's not synced, and it's 3:15. So the script still exists, but the cron job to run the script as root is no longer in the cron tab. So we're good there, and that's why it was appearing earlier, and that's why those netcat instances are still there. So it's best just to like filter for them and just kill them all. And since these are root context, I might actually run this as sudo just to make sure I can kill them. So you could just do, boom, F9 kill, F9 kill. If you don't have function keys, you can just click on it with your mouse. That's a really nice thing about htop is you can use your mouse for clicking on stuff. So it's kind of like a terminal-based GUI in a sense. But that's really it for today. Any questions? What's up?
That python.c instance, did you make any effort to try to find out what spawned that in this case? Or
Now, if well, it said the command on over here, what ran, it was actually just Python being ran like directly from the command line. So there could have been just a root shell that was existing that was running that. And just to confirm, we could just type who, and we could see who was signed into the machine at the exact time, or W2, it doesn't really matter. It shows like almost the same stuff. So if we did see that Python bash shell keeps spawning through htop, and we weren't sure on what user it is, we can see the active users have an active connection and be like, wow, there's this, Tom over here has been on this for quite a while, and that Python shell keeps spawning for some weird reason. So that's a good way to kind of check if there is some sort of persistence with a Python backdoor in a sense. But in our case, that was just a script that had root privileges and nothing else. It wasn't running, it wasn't setting up a reverse shell and then raising it to bin bash. It was just running bin bash locally. So that's really about it. I hope you guys learned something cool today, because this is very close to the competition, a lot of the stuff you find. All right, goodbye, guys.